Senator, thanks so much for your time tonight. Great talking to you, sir.
Glad to be with you.
First of all, your reaction on the news that Lieutenant Kim is going to get his guns back.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
He's a great young man, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, headed to Kosovo. And if you wrote this as a movie, nobody would buy it because it would be impossible to believe all these things happened. But it's one series of convoluted events led to another, and this young man has had his guns taken away from him for 2 years. But we finally got him back, and I must say that the chief of the D.C. police force, Kathy Lanier, when I called her last Thursday, couldn't have been nicer. And, I think it's the record time for a hearing in the District of Columbia.
Yeah. You wrote a strong letter to her, to the police chief. And in fact, when I was talking with Lieutenant Kim, he said, you know what, I know that he hand wrote at the bottom, please let us know soon. He said, but I never thought it would be this soon.
I didn't either. When you look at my handwriting, I should have been a doctor. But at the end of the day, she did call, to her credit, and said, listen, I've been a police officer for 22 years. I got a soft spot in my heart for a guy like him. Discretion is still part of being a police officer, and we hope we can get this thing done. And they did. But, what's the story of this case? The story of this case is just how convoluted our laws are in this country regarding lawful gun possession.
And specifically the laws in Washington. And I got to ask you, when you look at what Lieutenant Kim has been through, his guns confiscated, he was arrested, he was charged with 4 felonies. Are you looking at this point of introducing legislation to keep this from happening to somebody else?
Yeah, it is so convoluted. We're looking at how to fix it, but I don't know if you could ever duplicate this thing again if you tried. Here's the situation. His parents are in New Jersey. He left his guns, $10,000 worth, AR-15 and some pistols, left his guns in his parents' house in New Jersey, came back home from the war, got injured, drove down from New Jersey back to South Carolina, stopped at Walter Reed for a medical appointment. The guy's been through 3 months of surgeries. He got wounded pretty bad. And while he was stopped at Walter Reed, or trying to find Walter Reed, after he stopped, he got lost. And the cops pulled him over because he was going slow. They found that his driver's license was suspended in South Carolina, but that was a mistake because North Carolina told South Carolina he had a speeding ticket he didn't pay, but he actually paid it. They took him into the station. They asked him if he minded searching the car, and he said no. So the guns are in the back in a case separate from the ammo, and they say, well, that doesn't violate federal law, but in D.C. you can't possess a gun outside your house. So we're trying to find a way to make sure that never happens again. But isn't that the weirdest story you've ever heard?
Well, it is, but, I think it's so indicative of the anti-gun attitudes that you find, in our nation's capital, sadly.
Let me tell you about safety. I'd rather spend a day at live in a nuclear power plant than walk around up here. I mean, the gun laws in D.C. have been the most draconian in the nation when it comes to lawfully possessing a firearm for protection. It's got the highest level of violence. So clearly the model that D.C. has tried to follow all these years hasn't worked. Along comes the Heller decision, and they're wrapped around the axle, guys, about how to comply with the U.S. Supreme Court decision and Heller. And I just hope somebody will push D.C. internally to get with the program. But, yes, I will sit down with Senator DeMint, Tim Scott, and others and try to find a way to give some relief to people like this in the future.
I know, because when I was talking to Lieutenant Kim, and you mentioned the Heller case, but there you've got, the D.C. officials, they keep thumbing their nose right at the Heller decision, and they keep doing whatever they can to make it as hard as they can for people, first of all, to own a firearm, and then they arrest people like Lieutenant Kim who should never have been arrested. And I was talking to Lieutenant Kim, and he said, you know what, the only way we can deal with this is if lawmakers pass some legislation to stop this, because that's the only thing we have a chance in a lifetime of getting D.C. to follow.
And we're on the case, me and Jim DeMint and Tim Scott and others. We're going to see how we can find legislative relief for people like Lieutenant Kim. But, yeah, he had an AR-15 in his trunk in a case locked up, separate from the ammo, in complete compliance with federal law, and you got this wacky situation in D.C., and the guy stops to get treated at Walter Reed for war injuries, and they charge him with 4 felonies, and it takes 2 years and 2 senators, the NRA, and 3 Bulgarian midgets to get his guns back. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they call and Senator, they actually call Lieutenant Kim's gun collection dangerous articles.
I'd love to have it. Have you seen what he has?
Yeah.
I got an AR-15 under my bed. I do my reserve duty over in Afghanistan, and our unit, Task Force 435, detainee operations. I'm a member of that unit. I do about 2 or 3 tours a year in Afghanistan dealing with enemy prisoners. And we had a guy from Florida who got a gun company to put the seal of the unit, the logo of the unit, on pistols and AR-15s. Now, I bought one. I got it under my bed, and I dare anybody to come get it.
Talking with Senator Lindsey Graham, and Senator, again, any words of advice to the local politicians in D.C. who do have the power to change these laws?
Give us a break.
Yeah.
Basically, accept the fact that the goal of all these gun regulations of making D.C. a safer place hasn't worked. The Supreme Court is on record. Try to be reasonable with your citizens. Try not only to follow the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And you know what? NRA members possess guns lawfully. They're the most safety-conscious people in the world. Everybody who owns a gun and who hunts and believes in the Second Amendment rights to defend yourself, we're not the problem. The problem is the people who go out and, use guns illegally. Why should I lose my ability under the Second Amendment to freely and fairly possess guns because some knucklehead maybe use a gun? I mean, nobody takes my car away when somebody drunk, is a drunk driver with a car. So this is just an overreach, and I wish internally they would fix this. But the politics in D.C., not our left of center, they're like, in left field. But I will say the police chief couldn't have been nicer.
Mm-hmm. And, we really have to thank people like Lieutenant Kim, not only for his service to this country, we're talking about 3 tours of duty, but, here's a guy who knew he didn't do anything wrong, and he stood up for what he believed in, and that's what you need to do against these folks.
And he's about as decent a guy. I mean, he's not looking for Lieutenant Kim, there's a lot of things he's looking for. The limelight is not one of them.
That's right. That's very true.
He's about as good old basic American guy as you'll ever find, and I just hate this all happened. But let me tell you, if it hadn't been for the Washington Times reporter and the NRA, we would have never known about this because he's just that kind of guy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he really is. And did he basically set a precedent by doing what he did for other legal gun owners in the district?
Yeah, I think he shined a light on overreaction and stupidity. I think the next time a veteran going to Walter Reed gets stopped for being lost, and they got guns in the back that are locked up within federal law, they'll be less likely to go down this road again. But we need to institutionally change it. We need to provide some legal relief and get to the heart of the matter here and make sure that the D.C. in the District of Columbia, that not only they're complying with Heller, but the spirit of Heller. And when you're a service member, particularly trying to go back and forth to Walter Reed, that that we give you some protections here.
Absolutely. Senator, thank you again for your time, and great talking to you, sir.
Thanks to NRA and the Washington Times reporter. If it had not been for y'all guys, this would have never ended the way it did.
And thanks for picking up the ball and running with it, because I know that we never would have got an answer.
Well, when I first heard about it, I thought, well, they've been drinking over there. Nothing. This could not be true, but it was.
But he wanted to get him back before he went to Kosovo, and you helped him achieve that. So that's great on your part, too. And let us know when you move with that legislation.
Well, God bless Lieutenant Kim. Thanks.
All righty.